All right, for the second video, I'm going to start using new tools. So I've got a new wireless microphone for hopefully better audio quality. I'm going to be using editing software for the video to hopefully produce better output there. And then the project I'm going to do is a small cabinet that will be sort of an example project or a sample project for a bunch of different cabinetry that I need to do in the house for an office. So that cabinet is fairly simple, but it will use some new things like edge banding, a new air compressor that I've just got, and an HPLV spray gun to try to do the finish that matches what we've got in the house here. So simple project, but a lot of new things to learn, and I'm excited to get started, so let's get going. So this room was never finished completely. This room started, it's just roughed in. All the trim out to the edges of the room are done, and then behind here we just have an unfinished set of walls and a cavity and a design for a Murphy bed that folds down here with some cabinetry above, some bookshelves in the corners, and then one little small cabinet, which we're going to start working on, that's actually going to face the other way, but be accessible through the back here. So this is the back side of that bathroom wall, and you can see that there's sort of a built-in window, if you will, in the framing, and that's just been sheetrocked over. We just had them sheetrock over that. So we're going to drill a small hole here, measure out to figure out what the boundaries are, and then recreate that on the other side so we know where to cut this hole, cut out this window. Then our cabinet, our little small cabinet, is going to inset from the back, from the bathroom side into here, and it won't protrude beyond this. Then we'll put in a bookshelf here into this space when we're done. So this will be, there'll be back-to-back cabinets. But for now, we're going to go ahead and start working on getting this hole cut out and building a cabinet to fit in there to hold some stuff in the bathroom. A friend of mine who's a painter has a father who was also a painter, and his father told him at one point that the most important wall in a house is the wall across from where you sit on the toilet as a painter, because every day you're going to look at that and you're going to notice any little imperfection in that paint. So similarly, we're going to put a cabinet in this small bathroom here to hold toilet paper, and that cabinet is going to be on the wall behind where I'm sitting, conveniently located above the toilet. And we're going to cut into this wall and put a cabinet in there. We're going to try to match the trim in the room and the area around it, and that will just be a simple cabinet, kind of like a medicine cabinet, just for a cabinet for toiletries in this small room. That'll be a good cabinet to start with, and that will be the first part of our project. All right, since the wall's covered in plaster, it's going to chip a little bit when I start to cut it, and so I'm going to drill a hole kind of in the very middle of where we're going to work. And I'll just stick a pencil in there, and then I can use that to measure off and get exact dimensions, and we'll tape on the hole that we want to cut so that when I go to cut it, I've got a really good guide of where I want to cut my hole. So I don't have to be very careful with this because I'm just going to measure an offset from this hole in the middle, and I'll also get to sort of, if it chips a little bit in the middle, it won't matter. So we'll get started by cutting a hole. Here we go. Okay, with the offsets from the corners of that, or from the pencil taken from the back side in place, now I can go and I can kind of just lightly pencil in my box. Just to be doubly careful, I'm going to go ahead and mark a spot an inch in from each corner and drill a little pilot hole there with a tiny drill bit, and just compare on the other side and make sure that I'm exactly at an inch. Glad I checked with the little holes. It was just a little bit off on the top. All the other four corners were good. I was off by about 1/8 on one side, 1/16 on the other on the top. So I'll just make a little adjustment here. And that's still within the overlap of the cabinet when I go ahead and install the cabinet. So now I've got my box set up and I can get prepared to cut into this plaster. All right, this is a little tool for grout that I'm going to try to use in my vibrating tool. See if I can't get it to cut. It should be able to cut through the plaster. The plaster just has a really thin skin coat. I'm just going to cut through that a little bit and kind of trace around. Then I'll come back through with my utility knife. All right, got it all loosened. Now see if we can get it to go through. For the design, I started with the framing as it exists in the wall. So I measured it out and I did a little model here of the framing. There's 2x4 studs with a couple cross pieces, a header and a footer. And then there's a couple of boards laid flat on the side behind. So the cavity that the cabinet or window sits in is about 5 inches deep. And then to that, I added the plaster, modeled that, and the plaster I'm going to need to cut away. So that's drywall with plaster covering it, and that's need to get cut away. Inside there, we'll put a cabinet carcass, which will be plywood with exposed end grained here because it's going to get a face frame. And then it's got dados to accept shelves, which we'll add in. Those shelves will be veneer plywood with edge banding on the front, so they'll look nice. The back's 1/4 inch plywood, and the whole thing sits inside the framing in the back. And then in the front, we'll add the face frame. The face frame is solid wood, and it is wider than the 3/4 inch plywood sides, so that will kind of overlap the cutout in the plaster if I cut that carefully. And then finally, there's the whole thing is deep enough to fit toilet paper with a little bit of extra space on the bottom shelf. And then there's a door, which when it's closed is just a flat face with edge banding on it of plywood. And it's a tip to open door, and so when opened, it will be hinged on the one side so that you can get access to the cabinet. So that's the basic design, and then I'll use this model to create line out sheets, basically cut sheets, so I know what my dimensions are for my build. All right, got the shop all set up, it's clean. I've got my veneer plywood here. I've got the sheet up on the wall that's got my cutting diagram, my dimensions, and a little script of what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna go ahead and get started cutting out all the pieces for the cabinet. Okay, looking over my cut sheet, I got everything cut out. Things came out pretty well. I cut the two sides out in one. I cut them out as one piece, did all the routing, and then cut them across, and they worked out pretty well. They looked pretty good. The only thing I ran into was when I was cutting the frames, the face frames. There's a little bit of burn on the wood. One side's good, one side's a little burned. I think my saw it's pretty sharp, but it's just not strong enough to get through 1.5 inch oak like that. So I'll sand those down a little bit and hide them. This is going to be up against the wall. You won't be able to see that very much, but I can get that cleaned up. Okay, so this next part is something I've never done before. It's just edge banding with veneer. There's a sort of a glue-on veneer piece that's got heat-activated glue on the back, put on the edge of the plywood, and should hide the plies. I know there's big fancy tools. My buddy Caleb has a machine that's 3-phase power and takes up half of a room and does a really good job of this, and he would be mad that I'm using this because he'd probably rather see it done on a better machine. But I'm gonna give this a try and see how it works. I hope to use it on a few other things. So the way it works is you take a piece of this, cut it roughly to length, and it's a little bit oversized, so you're gonna put it on there, run a heater over it. I've got a little iron I'm gonna run over it, and that should activate the glue, and then you use a trimmer to trim off the bits when I'm done. So I'll see how this goes and on a little test piece and see how that works. Give it a try. So the edge trimmer on end grain seemed to chew it up pretty good on one side here, and that may be operator error, so I'm new to this tool. The other side looks okay, and the glue seems to hold in pretty good. My inclination is to trim that up by hand and not scratch up the veneer like that. But on the one side there, I've got a pretty good edge. I'm glad this is a test piece. I'll try one more side. Well, that piece worked a little bit better. with the grain, it seems to work pretty well. Matches nicely, and got the top. So I think I'll learn this process a little better and hopefully be able to edge up these boards. All right, I routed those out. I had to cut a little corner here because the matching side on the frame has a little bit of a curve from the radius in there. This is probably not the easiest way to do a face frame, but it does register well, and then it'll make it easier to glue and not have the glue joints show. So again, I'd probably do this a little differently, but these have to overlap in a strange way to fit out, to obscure the cut in the plaster when this goes into a hole. So maybe slightly different than you would normally do. I'll glue this up. So I have the box glued up now, the face frame's glued on, and then I went ahead and sanded it up, and it looks pretty good. The part that is exposed outside the plaster all looks really nice, and got all the burn sanded off and everything. The doors all sanded up with the edge banding, and the shelves as well. I'm not going to put all this together yet. The back is just placed in here to make sure it fits until I finish everything, because it's just going to be small spaces that are hard to reach with the spray to spray the finish. Speaking of the spray, that's going to be something new to me, like the edge banding. I haven't done that before, and this is going to be using a new HPLV sprayer that and a new compressor. And so I'm going to be using a water-based clear finish and try to get that to match what is in the house now. And I'll practice on some test pieces. I'll show you that next, learning how to use the sprayer and try to find the right finish with the right sheen and everything. So we'll move on to that now that all the pieces are cut out and assembled, or pre-assembled, ready for the final assembly. I went ahead and set up the sprayer. First I had to adjust the pressure, input pressure from the compressor. Then I took a couple test shots and it was putting out way too much pressure, so I backed the pressure off. That looked a little better, and then I started to open up how much paint was coming out so that I could get more finished material out. Then with that looking pretty good, I tried to open up the fan pattern so that the pattern was taller and thinner and taller, going from a circle to a kind of an oval. With that wider pattern, I needed to open up more paint into it. This is all adjustments I'm learning kind of for the first time. I'm also just spraying water here. I just had water set up in the gun so that I could kind of get a sense of what the pattern looked like on cardboard. With that set up, went ahead and filtered out my finished material just to make sure there was no imperfections in there to clog the paint gun. And then this is the first spraying I did. This is on just a piece of my workbench that I just threw up there to have some other material to finish. And this is a case where when I went back and watched this video, I noticed that I was going way too fast and kind of swinging back and forth in an arc that was keeping it at different distances. So this is a case where the video helped me learn a little bit. This is a little bit better when I went ahead and did my test piece. I may be slow, but I do learn, so eventually I was able to kind of improve that form a little bit. This could still be better, but I've got it better directed straight down onto the work surface, and I'm spraying at a little bit slower rate. Still room for improvement, but it's better based on looking at my video. So the test pieces worked pretty well. I tried, I had a piece of original, this is from the house, that was finished with some sort of lacquer. And so I've got the two test pieces I did. I ran 3 coats on each one of them. We looked at the sheen and liked the one of the matte finish better. So we'll go with that one. It was good practice to go through essentially 6 different setups with the spray gun and get used to that. I've got all the pieces set up here. I've got my shelves just screwed from the bottom, stood off so that I can kind of get to all sides without having to flip the boards. Everything else is set up here on the workbench, and I'll go ahead and spray these out. For assembly, I first needed to just measure out where the hinges would be placed. Then drill out those holes for the hinge. I found it easier to use that large hole to center the hinge and then just add the small holes in with a pencil here. Drill those out, pre-drill those to accept the screws. And then go ahead and screw in the hinges on the door side. The cabinet size is a little bit easier. I just measured that out, had to account for the thickness of the door and pre-drill those. The shelves were a little bit too long, just barely, so I just trimmed them down a little bit here so they fit snug in the box without squeezing the sides out of the box. Then with everything put in place, I went ahead and added the back. The back has a finished side and an unfinished side, and it's a snug fit, so I had to sort of press it in and tap it in to get it in place. Then I marked off where the shelves were in back so that when I drove my staples, I knew I would hit the shelves and not the back, the open back. Then I went ahead and shot the back in with staples. Okay, this is the moment of truth. See if we can get this thing to fit. Got the window cleaned up, but it is a really close measurement, so we'll see how close it actually is. Really close. I'm a little bit on the sides. I gotta open up. So I fought with the wall for a little bit. It's super close. I'm just like a 1/16 of an inch off, and I figured it's easier to modify the box than the wall. So I ran it through the table saw and cut up, just skimmed it on the end here, and then used a chisel to carve off the rest of the veneer. Did that on both sides, and that got me hopefully enough space. We'll see if it fits now with that hack. So it looks like I'm good on the sides, and I've just got a little bit of space on the top and bottom, so I may resort to the same thing. Okay, hopefully the third time is the charm with this arts and crafts project. I peeled the veneer off the top and bottom of the box to get a little bit more space. Let's see if we get closer this time. Well, it's not going to need any screws to hold it in. All right, now I can add the door. We have a cabinet. All right, that wraps up video point 2 of my initial series. Cabinet worked out pretty well. I think I give myself about a B+. The part that you see out here looks pretty good. There were some things that I ran into along the way that I'd like to improve, but that's why I did the first one. When I do more cabinets, hopefully I can learn from those mistakes. I learned a lot about the editing software to get this video put together, and the microphone and some of the other tools I used. And I found it was really useful to video my first pass of doing the painting and then look at that video and hopefully improve my technique by seeing what I was doing well and what I was needing to improve. Thanks again for watching this video. I hope to do more soon, but until then, I'll be out building. Take care.